I would like to call the State Board of Education board meeting for June 3rd to order. If we could have the roll call, please.
Here. Here.
Dr. Freitas?
Here.
Dr. Hendry?
Yes.
Mr. Wachowski?
Good morning.
Mr. Melton?
Here.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Here.
Mr. Watts? Mrs. Wicker?
Here.
Dr. Yeager? Here. Superintendent Ritt?
Here. If everyone would join me, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we'll have a welcome from Provost Dutta from Purdue University.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Is this
If you could come to the podium.
okay?
Thank you.
Quite no. Good morning, everyone, and Madam Superintendent, distinguished board members, honored guests, and the audience. On behalf of President Daniels, our faculty, staff, and students, a warm welcome to you all. We are very pleased that you have chosen to come here to Purdue University to have your meeting. We are just about 3 weeks ago, we graduated about 9,700 students in our 5 commencements. And that was an occasion for President Daniels and I to thank the parents, the students, and the staff. This morning it is a distinct pleasure for me to thank you because you are a very important piece of the higher education enterprise in the state. You lay the foundation for the students to succeed. You set them on a path that oftentimes bring them to here and other institutions in the state. This partnership of the land-grant institution and the state has helped us produce great teachers that we are very proud of, and it has been in place for over 150 years. It is important to remember that we make every effort. We are very deliberate and make every effort to enroll, admit more Indiana students at Purdue, and things are looking good. We have a program that we have just initiated last year to help transfer students transfer into Purdue, and those numbers are looking good. It is also important to remember for all of us that it is not a straight line from us to the K-12. It is more like a virtuous circle. You prepare the students, or you help them prepare for the rigors of higher education, and we in turn train the teachers to help them succeed, to help the students succeed. More importantly, as a research university, we research on how students learn. In the 21st century, it is my firm belief that the process of learning is going to be even more important than the mastery of content. I remind that to our faculty here, and I follow it myself, because the content is just a backdrop which keeps on changing. It is the process of learning that begins in the K-12 arena that continues in higher education. And that is what our students will have to rely on as they become lifelong learners in order to succeed. So this is very important for us. You are well aware of the iSTEM Resource Network and the flagship Indiana Science Initiative. The program is doing exceedingly well. To date, we have supported, or the ISI has supported, 136 schools, over 50,000 students, and more than 2,000 teachers. The results for the 2013-14 year are very good. In grades 3rd through 8, we are seeing a statistically significant increase in the physical sciences knowledge. For female students, also in the same grades, we are seeing a statistically significant increase in earth sciences knowledge. So these are all good things for the state and for the nation. On May 11th and 12th, we completed a 2-day fair at the Motor Speedway, and it's called M-Step 3. You probably know about that. It combines motorsports, advanced engineering, and medical engineering. 1,000 students from 18 schools participated, hands-on demonstration. And I'll just read you a couple of quotes that we got as a feedback from the 6th grade students. One said, "Learning about the robotics inspired me for so many reasons. I mean, how many chances do girls get dealing with robotics or construction? Most of the time it is because some people don't think we can do it." So this is changing attitudes at a very early age, which is exceedingly good for the state. The second quote, "Thank you for a marvelous event yesterday. I enjoyed all of the STEM stations I could visit. My favorite station was the robot stacking boxes station. If students can operate those machines at an early age, think of all the machines that they can operate at a job." Sure, absolutely. Starts early. So the right messages are getting through, and Purdue is deeply engaged. So we believe that we have a solemn responsibility to enrich the academic experience of students across the state. And we are very pleased to partner with you in various endeavors, to take advice from you, and look forward to more collaboration. So I think in the 21st century, this is what a new land-grant institution is going to have to do. More engagement across the state and preparing students with the process of learning such that they can be lifelong learners that they will need to be as they move from profession to profession and so on and so forth. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I know you have a busy day ahead, so let me step out. And once again, welcome to Purdue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gordon?
I just want to thank you for welcoming us to Purdue University, a great Hoosier institution of higher learning.
Boilermaker institution.
Well, yes, but in the great state of Indiana.
Yes, yes, sir, that's right.
And I will say to your point, as a native Bloomingtonian and graduate of the other Big Ten university in the great state of Indiana, it's a privilege to be here, and thank you for all that you do, President Daniels does, and the rest of the faculty and staff for Hoosiers who come to Purdue to get a great education. And I always feel a little bit nervous coming into West Lafayette. I'm just kidding. And I won't say anything about where the old oaken bucket is, but we really appreciate what you all do. And I would especially note the fact that you have frozen tuition for the last 4 years. I think is incredibly commendable, and that's so important to making higher education affordable, and that has a tremendous impact on the ability of students to go to college. So thank you for that, and thanks for welcoming us.
Thank you. If I may just take 30 seconds. I have been visiting all our regional campuses, North Central, in Westville, in Calumet, Fort Wayne, IUPUI. I was just at Calumet and Fort Wayne the last 2 days. And what I'm trying to do is to establish a framework for partnership across the system. We are a research university here at West Lafayette, a research one, as they say. But it is very important for the state to be able to leverage all the regional campuses that are at Purdue University, that form Purdue University. And that hasn't happened in a long time. So, and I'm reaching out to those institutions and being welcomed. And we are hearing about different student bodies that go to those institutions. The missions are different, but we do add value to each other as we collaborate, as we share best practice, and do good for the state. You know, so I say this because Indiana has a great opportunity if Purdue and IU could collaborate in many areas, which will become exceedingly important in this knowledge economy of the 21st century. With a population of 6 million and the tax base, it is going to be exceedingly difficult for the state to fund expensive but important programs in multiple locations. So I'm looking forward to partnering with IU, as I am looking forward to establishing and strengthening the collaborations with our regional campuses. So I want to emphasize that it is the way to go. This is something very important for a state like Indiana. We can be more competitive than we are if our higher education institutions work for the better, for the good of the state by partnering. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. I wish to withdraw the item on the consent agenda. We're going to have some further conversation with that. You've got your preliminary and know of the funds and know kind of where we're headed, but we're going to bring more specifics to you. So we're going to delay that until July. So you can expect that to be on the July agenda. Any other changes to the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the agenda signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the approval of the minutes on May 7th. You've all received them. Any discussion or changes to the minutes? All those in favor of approval of the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All of those opposed? The minutes stand approved. The next item is the statement of the chair, and Provost Dutta, I wish to thank you and Purdue for hosting us today. And if I might add a couple of comments here after your talk. First of all, the Department of Education absolutely adores working with your Department of Education in preparing our teachers. And we love that you have such a focus on STEM education and making sure that we are preparing our teachers to be STEM oriented in their work that they do. Also, I want to let you know that this board approved 2 robotics courses, so we're all into the STEM and the robotics, and I go to the robotics competitions, and I like them so much I stay all day, and that doesn't happen a lot where somebody's been invited to speak and then they end up staying the whole day to watch competitions. But I absolutely adore them, and the number of girls that are entering on the teams is actually increasing too. And then I also want to say, to echo your process for learning. I often say in many arenas, our job in the schools, teachers' jobs, is to make sure our learners know how to learn. That's what they're there for. They are in charge of their learning, and they need to know how to be a learner, and that's what we send them forth with. So I appreciate your comments this morning. Along with that, I want to welcome the new board members. Dr. Eddie Melton and Dr. Vince Bertram And Leanne, is it Kwiatkowski? Kwiatkowski, thank you. You may have to correct me several times, Leanne. Byron Ernest, and then Dr. Steve Yeager. And if you would, during the next segment, underneath board member comments, if you would introduce yourself at that time and tell us a little bit more about you, I think the audience would appreciate that. So I welcome you again, and I know that I've set up some individual meetings with you just to get to know you. So I look forward to that. I've been doing a lot of school wrap-up with graduations and ceremonies that are going on. And one of my last graduation responsibilities was at IUPUI with the education class that graduated there, and thoroughly enjoyed that. And then I had a very moving experience at Hope Academy. And Hope Academy is in Indianapolis, and it's our only in the state. It's a drug alcohol recovering high school. And there's just nothing more important than seeing young people who have had such challenges make it to the graduation ceremony in Indiana, and then know that they're going to be okay going forward. So Hope Academy does a lot of great work with our children who are in need of that type of service. And then we had a special ceremony at the State House for our Milken Award winners. And so I just want to reemphasize Lori Davis of Pine Tree Elementary in Avon. Sarah, do you know her?
I do.
Okay.
Very deserving.
And then Kelly Wilbur of Southport Elementary in MSD Perry Township. We had an absolutely wonderful ceremony and in honoring those two young ladies. And then the Indiana School Food Service Employee of the Year is Peggy Haskett of Thorpe Creek Elementary in Fishers. And then we had a national winner, Josephine Brewington, National 2015 Substitute Teacher of the Year, works in Beech Grove School Corporation and has for many, many years. So that's quite an honor to have a national distinction here with substitute teachers who actually do yeoman's work when teachers are absent, and you want the quality type of substitute teachers to take the place of the teacher that might be there for the day or two that happens. So with that, we'll move on to board member comments and reports. And Mr. Melton, would you start and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Thank you. First off, I want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to introduce myself. My name is Eddie Melton. I am a manager of governmental and community relations at NIPSCO, which is the gas and electric provider for the northern third of Indiana. And it is truly an honor, and I'm truly humbled to have the opportunity to serve in this role and capacity. I just look forward to working with you all as we continue to try to move education forward in the state of Indiana.
So you want to tell them you work on a commission and your involvement with education? Tell us
Yeah,
a little bit more, because you have quite a bit of involvement.
Well, absolutely. Currently serve as the chairman for the Indiana Commission on the Social Status of Black Males, where we study issues that impact the minority male population in the state of Indiana, from health to social services, education, criminal justice, and a variety of other issues. We develop an annual report to recommend things to the community on how various cities and municipalities can address these key issues. Currently, in my role at NIPSCO, we were very instrumental in implementing the state's first energy academy, which is in partnership with the Michigan City School Corporations. So this is definitely a great opportunity, and we're looking forward to introducing students to the energy sector in Northwest and Northern Indiana. So just a few things that we're working on from an education perspective.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Dr. Vincent Bertram?
Yes, it's a great honor to be here, and I am a former teacher, principal, school superintendent, and now president and chief executive officer of Project Lead the Way, which is the nation's leading provider of STEM education. And next year we'll be in over 8,000 schools in all 50 states and growing rapidly, and some very important work. But as I think about this board and this honor, I love this state, and I'm passionate about education. And I don't believe there's anything more important to our state's economy and to our children's future than us getting this right and making sure that we provide the kind of experience for our students that nurtures this curiosity and this love for learning and their ability to learn and to develop transportable skills and understand they're lifelong learners. So this is very important work, and I'm, again, honored to be here. And again, it's I want to reiterate something that I just think this is the most critical aspect of our state's economy, as the foundation of our education system. So again, thank you.
Thank you. Leanne Kwiatkowski?
Well, it's my honor to have been asked to serve on Indiana's State Board of Education. I first want to thank my superintendent, Dr. Adina Cushenberry from MSD of Warren Township, for her willingness to support this important work. And with over 30 years of diverse educational experience, I've been at the school level, district level, state level. I really hope to bring a unique perspective to the board and to our obligation to, as Vince said, get it right for students. We really want to make sound decisions that will benefit students, our teachers, our administrators, our parents, and our school communities. And I look forward to collaboratively working with our fellow board members.
Thank you. Dr. Stephen Yeager?
Well, good morning, and my transition has been from elementary teacher through middle school teacher through high school counselor to a 7 through 12 administrative position, and then middle school administration, and then superintendent seat. So I've bounced around a little bit from northern Indiana to southern Indiana. So I have had the pleasure of working with lots of different levels of students and teachers and parents. I retired June of 14 and have kind of failed retirement apparently because I am currently a consultant for a couple of districts and then have taken on this task and look forward to working with everyone. And we're really looking forward to having a nice conversation yesterday afternoon and as well as last evening with some board members and making things better for girls and boys in the classroom, and that's what our focus has to be and needs to be, is making things better for girls and boys.
Thank you, Dr. Yeager. And then we have Byron Ernest.
Well, thank you.
Dr. Byron Ernest.
Thank you. It certainly is an honor to serve, as the others have said. I have to say, though, that it is good to be back home on Purdue's campus as a Purdue graduate, particularly of the agriculture college here. And as an agriculture teacher, as Leanne said, I think I bring an interesting perspective from a career and technical education perspective, because it was always my goal that while I didn't teach a core subject, what I did in my classroom was important to the core subjects for those students, and I firmly believe that you have a role in both career and college readiness with that. Then, as you also know, I spent some time at Manual High School in the turnaround piece. That brings an interesting perspective because as I look at other schools going through this, I know what that's like to be the deer in the headlight. There, and so understand that piece, and now with my role in Hoosier Academies and the online blended side of education, really am honored to bring that perspective to the board.
Any other comments from board members? All right. I tend to be a first person name person, so if you don't mind, when we have a discussion, I will call on you by first name, and that's just my preference, so I'll just let you know that. We do not have anybody that wishes to speak to general public comment. The consent agenda item has been removed. We have no adjudications today. We are on to new business. So the first item is initiate rulemaking for summer school program, and we have one person who wishes to speak to this topic, and it is Rhonda Eshelman. Rhonda, if you would approach, please. And Rhonda, you have 5 minutes.
Superintendent Ritz, board members, thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm Rhonda Eshelman. I'm principal at Indiana Online Academy, and I'd like to comment on the motion on today's agenda to initiate rulemaking to amend the current summer school funding rule to give flexibility to schools to utilize summer school program funds within the calendar school year. As a reminder, there's a three-category method of classifying summer school courses for the purpose of reimbursing summer school and instructional costs. Courses classified in Category 1 are reimbursed
at 105% if supported by appropriation. If not supported, it is reduced proportionally among all claims submitted to the department. These costs are deducted from the total appropriation and the remaining funds allocated to reimburse categories 2 and 3. Category 1 funds are high school courses that count towards graduation and grades 1 through 3 reading programs. Category 2 are classes for grades 1 through 8 in language arts and math and grades 4 through 8 reading. Category 3 classes are grades 1 through 8, curricular programs, enrichment, and multidisciplinary classes for grades 9 through 10, and those classes not counting towards graduation. In 2014, all 3 categories were fully funded using the total appropriation budget. In April, school corporations turned in their estimated 2015 summer school costs, which totaled more than $29 million, with an appropriation amount of only $18.3 million. The actual costs are always lower than the estimated costs, but how much lower will that be? With current summer school programs already projected to exceed the current appropriation, why would we want to add additional programs to this list? What will be cut to add a new program? If you do decide to allow summer school funds for programs during the school year, I ask that you consider funding these through Category 2 or 3. The current Category 1 courses should be the highest priority in the funding. Summer school gives high school students the ability to retake a course they may have failed and stay on track for graduation. It also allows students to work ahead to make room in their schedule for additional AP, dual credit, and elective courses. Districts can partner and hold courses at a central location or offer online courses to give students options they may not get in their districts. Summer school offers flexibility to earn credits that students don't have during the school year. If funding is reduced, these options can go away. In summary, I ask that you not add any additional programs to the already tight summer school appropriation. If you do decide to allow programs during the school year to receive summer school funding, then fund it from categories 2 and 3, not category 1. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, and I know all of those types of things would be taken into consideration as we do go through the rulemaking process.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the staff and the chair, at the last meeting, I wanted to make a motion at this meeting to initiate rulemaking to amend the current summer school funding rule to give flexibility to schools to utilize summer school program funds within the school calendar year. We have many schools that are doing balanced calendars now, offering intersessions throughout the school, and we wanted to be sure that we gave ourselves flexibility for our schools within the summer school funding formula pieces that we do. So really, this is just initiating rulemaking. Then we'll begin the process and really talk about what the language should say. I make a motion to initiate rulemaking to amend the current summer school funding rule to give flexibility to schools to utilize summer school program funds within the school calendar year. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Bertram,
Yes.
Dr. Ernest,
Yes.
Dr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Hendry,
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski,
Yes.
Mr. Melton,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Brien,
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker,
Yes.
Dr. Yeager,
Yes.
Superintendent Ritz.
Yes. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the Islamic School of Plainfield Freeway School Contract. I'm going to have Risa Renee from the Department of Education, and as experts from the department, if you would introduce yourself and tell a little bit about what you do for the new board members, I think that would be very helpful. And we'll go ahead and proceed. And John, I think you're joining her?
Yes, yes.
Has everybody introduce both of you and tell your role?
I'm John Sneathen. I'm your interim executive director and general counsel. I think I've met both of you. My colleague's Risa Renee, the assistant superintendent of school support services. And Risa's the content expert. I'm just here to frame this for you and say that this is a joint recommendation of both state board staff and Department of Education staff. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Risa to give you some more information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to the State Board of Education. I'm happy to have the opportunity to work with all of you in the future. I am Risa Renee. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for School Achievement and Support Services.
And can you kind of tell what that means and what you oversee?
Okay. I oversee a number of program areas that are sort of the operational side, for lack of a better term. My program areas are school food and nutrition, school accreditation, the School Safety Academy, student services, which includes coordinators that work with school counselors, school social workers, school nurses, and school psychologists. I oversee educator effectiveness and licensing, and school transportation. I don't think I've left anyone out. So,
That's a lot.
The Islamic School of Plainfield is seeking approval as a freeway school, and they have put together a petition which you have in your materials. The school has addressed all of the issues that the department and the state board staff have determined need to be addressed to be included in the contract that the school will enter into with the State Board of Education should this freeway request be approved. The freeway accreditation process allows schools to be accredited but yet to have some flexibility in the application of certain statutes that are enumerated in the law so that they can meet the needs of their unique student populations, the mission of their school that is a little different than traditional public school corporations. And John may be able to explain that statute a little in a little more detail if you need more information. However, the Islamic school has been serving preschool through grade 2 students, and they are going to be adding grade 3 in the 15-16 school year, and then they will add grade 4 the following year and grade 5 the year after that. We have gone out and we have done a personal visit with the school to confirm the information that they have included in their petition. They have a very close partnership with Plainfield Community Schools, and they have adopted Plainfield's curriculum and their textbooks for all their core academic subjects. However, they are seeking to have a waiver of the textbook requirements so that they may use non-standard curricular materials to teach the non-academic subjects and religious education. They also are seeking a waiver for instruction in health and safety and hygiene because they have their own curriculum that is faith-based that they will be teaching their students in those areas. The Islamic school has also arranged to administer ISTEP next spring for their 3rd graders, and they will be working with Plainfield Community Schools personnel on a contract basis to administer ISTEP to their students. We feel that they've done a nice job in their petition addressing the areas that they need to, and the state board staff and the department would jointly recommend that you approve 5-year freeway accreditation for them, and that you approve entering into a 5-year accreditation contract with them. Should they not maintain progress and hit the goals that they have set in their petition for making academic progress and progress on attendance, which they're required to do, then at some point, if they are not meeting those goals, then the contract becomes void and their accreditation would expire. But we recommend at this point that you approve the 5-year accreditation under the freeway statute for them.
And I might add for the new members that are here that we approved a new application process for freeway schools, and so they have used the new process.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and the new contract. There's a new contract in place that was just developed jointly with state board staff and legal staff in the department this spring, and we are using the new contract process.
I move to approve the Islamic School of Plainfield's Freeway School Accreditation application
For 5 years.
for 5 years.
Okay, thank you. A second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
I have a question, and just out of curiosity, and thank you very much for the information. As I read this application, and I heard a quote, it was something you just said a moment ago that I just raised as a general question. You said that this allows schools the flexibility to meet the unique needs of its students, to work outside of state statute and regulations. I guess one question I have is, why would we want any school to be subjected to state statutes and regulations that don't give them the flexibility to meet the unique needs of its students? And I think all schools need that flexibility. So as we move forward, I think it'd be an interesting conversation, I think, to have.
It would, and it would be interesting legislative language.
Was that a question? Sorry.
No, it was. I think it was framed as a statement, but
Good, because I don't have another answer for that.
I do have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned, I think early, either you or John mentioned I read, but I don't recall hearing in your comments I read. So when the students in this school move to 3rd grade, are they taking the I read test?
I believe they have to take
Yeah,
all the state
I think
required
that
assessments.
I think they will be administering all the
Yes.
required state assessments.
Was that in the application? I didn't see it.
Well, specifically, I-STEP was called out in the application, but the requirement is that they administer
All.
the state assessments that are required. And we would certainly follow up with that and ensure that they did.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Dr. Bertram?
yes.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Hendry?
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski?
Yes.
Mr. Melton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
Yes.
Superintendent Ritz?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item is canceling the RFP for turnaround school operators. John?
This is an RFP that the, I think, Department of Education staff initiated in 2013. It was to solicit a contract for a turnaround school operator. As it turned out, the services of a turnaround school operator were not needed, and so the contract was never executed, but the RFP still hangs out there as a living document. This is simply bureaucratic housekeeping to withdraw that RFP. We simply need the state board to approve to do that.
So we have a motion to cancel the RFP for turnaround school operators. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Bertram?
Yes.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Hendry?
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski?
Yes.
Mr. Melton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
Yes.
Superintendent Ritz?
Yes. Motion carries. Next item is selection of State Board of Education staff member to serve on the Committee on School Data Reporting. John, if you could give us a brief overall of what the duties might be for this committee. I know it's supposed to meet twice a year, but I think right off the start there may be the need for a few meetings to get some work completed. And then I guess I just want everybody to understand that if you're volunteering for that and we have somebody from the board serving, you know what you're getting into.
Right. This is a legislative committee. I think it's being run by Senator Pete Miller. As I understand it, the purpose of this committee is to reduce some of the redundancy in state reporting requirements to try to streamline it and make it more efficient. So our thought is that somebody who is sort of at the ground level with those reports would be a good candidate to sit on this board, because you're going to be advising legislators and others who may not have a practical background in it. And I know some of you have expressed some interest in that. And our recommendation is for those that do have an interest, simply speak up now, maybe discuss your background, qualifications, and interest, and then let the board put it to a nomination and a vote.
So could you, I think we might need to talk a little bit, there's some things that need to be done before July 31st, I believe, and then after July 31st, really, things will come to the board, because what we have happening in our schools is a great deal of surveys, a great deal of data collection from other agencies, not just the department that statutorily has requirements to collect data. So we are really going to be looking at really holistically what comes from other departments, what kinds of how can we streamline things, what recommendations can we make. And I think just in the short term, there's going to need to be a few meetings, because July 31st, we do have to have some things
yes,
completed.
and I think whoever decides to serve on this board, they should be prepared for a time commitment of, I would say, at least 4 meetings, and those could last several hours. And then I think there's a report due to the legislature in the fall. So it's kind of a short window, maybe an intense time commitment, followed up by some substantive report writing. So bear that in mind. If you're going to throw your hat in the ring, it could be a significant time commitment.
And myself or my designee will serve as the chair of that committee. So do we have any volunteers? Uh-oh.
Some people may be shy. If I can, Madam Chair, I can out them and tell you those who've expressed an interest to try to get the ball rolling. I think Dr. Ernest has expressed an interest. Ms. Kwiatkowski has expressed an interest. I know Ms. Carrie Wicker has expressed an interest. There may be others, but I think it would be good if you simply discussed your interest, your background, how you interact with this data at the local level, and then let the board decide who they feel seems to be most qualified for that committee.
Sure. Cool. Carrie, you want to start?
Well, and I when this was on the agenda, I was interested understanding the time commitment here soon. We're, not that everyone needs to know our vacation plans, but we're going to be hiking through Yellowstone and the Tetons for about a month. And so, so I would love to be a part of this, but I understand my own time constraints, and I want someone who can be dedicated to it and has the time for it. So.
Okay. Leanne?
Well, like you, Carrie, the last 2 weeks in June, I'll be taking some classes. And so if we had meetings outside in July, I'd be available. My level of experience at the district level, I'm involved with quite a bit of our state reporting. And when I worked at the state, I also was involved when we tried to clean up and reduce some of the redundancies with Molly Chamberlain. And so I have some experiences both from everyday gathering data to report, as well as knowing it at the state level.
Okay, and I think we could arrange to have the meetings begin in July, because I myself have some conflicts at the end of June. Byron?
My interest came because of when we went in for the turnaround for manual of having an entirely new staff. That's a monster, the reporting piece and the redundancies of that. And so we had to set up some pretty tight procedures and for doing that. And so I certainly feel for that when that came up on that. So that was my interest to that. But would certainly defer to my colleagues on doing that as well.
Okay, so how do we want to proceed here? Just nominate somebody and take a vote? All right.
Do you want a nomination?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would nominate Leanne.
All right, so Leanne's been nominated to serve as on behalf of the board on the Committee on School Data Reporting. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any more discussion? All right, let's take a roll call.
Dr. Bertram.
Yes.
Dr. Ernest.
Yes.
Dr. Freitas.
Yes.
Mr. Hendry.
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski.
Yes.
Mr. Melton.
Yes.
Mrs. O'Brien.
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker.
Yes.
Dr. Yeager.
Yes.
Superintendent Ritz.
Yes. Welcome, Leanne.
Thank you.
Next item is selection of SBOE members to serve on the Strategic Planning Committee. Gordon, you want to address this a little bit?
Sure. So.
And are you still willing to chair that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Maybe I can just give a brief overview, and Ashley, if you want to just give a little more detail and a little flavor. The Strategic Planning Committee, of which I've been chair since last fall, oversees the implementation of the strategic plan that the board adopted last year. And if I'm hoping that all of you have had the opportunity to review that. If you haven't, please do so as soon as you can. It's a guiding document for the board. It's a changing document, but it really helps us set our priorities as a board in terms of seeing how we're doing compared to what our priorities are that we've adopted. And so with that, Dr. Freitas, B.J. Watts have served, and former board member Dr. Brad Oliver was on the board. So I think we thought it would make sense to think about the new committee makeup. And so Ashley, if I can just turn it over to you to provide a little bit more detail about kind of what things we've been considering. I know that a couple items that we've been really focused on in the last 6 months have been the board's legislative agenda, which part of our responsibilities as a board is to provide legislative recommendations to the Indiana General Assembly and the governor. We did that, I think, for the first time or earlier this year. And then secondly, we've been looking very closely at the important issue of teacher evaluations. So over the course of the last eight to 9 months, we've been focused on that at a very high level.
Mm-hmm. So let me start with time commitment, and then I'll get into the weeds a little bit. The Strategic Planning Committee meets at least once a month. Usually it's only once a month, but if a project is on board that maybe needs more time from the Strategic Planning Committee members, there's flexibility that's needed to make sure that these projects are driven in an effective way. The Strategic Planning Committee is primarily working on a couple of different items at the moment. One of them is stakeholder engagement. We're working with the Department of Education. The department has their family-friendly schools initiative, and making sure that we're collecting good feedback from the field. And that looks a number of different ways that the Strategic Planning Committee is paying attention to. So the survey that's coming back from the communities and the schools, but then also we're consistently, as the board, conducting surveys from educators on what's going on with evaluation, not just for teachers, but also for administrators. And that's where a significant amount of time has been spent with the Strategic Planning Committee members over the past 6 months, really reviewing the feedback and the surveys. And you'll actually see an item on discussion today that has come from the Strategic Planning Committee, and we'll get more into that later. This committee is, for the lack of a better term at the moment, more weedy. So this committee pays attention to the different projects and strategies and the status of projects that the board says are important. And they oftentimes defer to state board staff and Department of Education staff to make sure that we're reporting back to you all as the board and the Strategic Planning Committee on a regular basis with the information that you guys need to make policy decisions. So that's sort of the high-level overview. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are questions specific about the committee as well.
And Ashley and Gordon, just so that you know, I've instructed my staff to be prepared at our July meeting to really give an overview from the department's perspective on where we are with the strategic plan. So the data collection pieces and the information that we have and the advancement that we're making on the actual goals. So we'll give an update at the next board meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, if I could just mention, so we do have a strategic plan which has a number of components, and then we've also created, the state board staff as well as the Department of Education staff have created a balanced scorecard which tracks with data each initiative or each goal and priority that is set out in the strategic plan. So it's a really useful tool that is continuously updated with information. It's on the State Board of Education website, so I would encourage those at home, those here in the audience, to take a look at that when you get a chance.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Sarah?
I have a question, not specific to the Strategic Planning Committee specifically, but if we're looking at general membership, there have been a variety of other committees that we have utilized throughout the year with the board. Some are circumstantial, so whether it's assessment committee or a turnaround committee. Mm-hmm. Is there any intent to have any other regularly meeting committees at the same time that people might want to have in consideration for membership, or is this the only one that will be ongoing as we continue?
Would you like me to answer that?
Sure.
This is certainly at the discretion of the board. Okay. The way that I've seen things happen over time is as the board's determined area of study and that the board needs to really get into the weeds on something, like turnaround, figuring out what's going on there, what's happened over time, it calls for a committee. So as time goes on, as the board sees a need for study in assessment, for example, or turnaround, for example, then the board can convene a committee at any time.
Okay.
So do we have any interested members?
Yeah, I guess I would just say, you know, probably the first thing, BJ's on vacation, so I don't know that we can speak for him, but I haven't heard from him that he is not interested in continuing to serve. I know that Dr. Freitas is here today, so maybe he can weigh in on his interest. I think there should probably be some continuation of membership, given kind of what we've done over the course of the last couple years, but would welcome a new member or two or more if there's a higher level of interest.
David, what's your interest?
Yes, I am willing to continue to serve. I think it's been 2 years of good work and 2 years of important work to set the vision and the direction for where we're headed. So I would enjoy continuing and intend to contribute if supported.
So perhaps, you know, at least one more person?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody have an interest? Dr. Bertram? Dr. Yeager? You guys are pointing at each other. I thought maybe you're like, you go, you go.
I would allow Vince to volunteer.
You're stepping back, right?
I would be happy to do that. That'd be
All
great.
right.
So.
Thank you, Vince. All right, so let's make a motion. We'll put BJ in there, and if he doesn't want to, then we'll see what we want to do at the next meeting. So there's a motion to approve Gordon as the chair, and BJ and David and Vince, and we'll certainly put their formal names in the minutes to be members of the Strategic Planning Committee for the State Board of Education. Is there a second? Second. Is there any discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Dr. Bertram?
Yes.
Dr. Ernst?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Hendry?
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski?
Yes.
Mr. Melton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Watts? Mrs. Wicker?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
Yes.
Superintendent Ritz?
Yes. Next item is the approval of continued state accreditation status for teacher preparation programs at Marian University, and that will be followed by then a similar approval for Taylor University. So we'll do them separately, but Risa, you can just address the process at one time.
Thank you. In Indiana, we have 47 teacher preparation institutions, and those teacher preparation programs must have state approval, but many of them seek also to have national accreditation. The national accrediting body for many years has been the National Council of Accreditation of Teacher Education, which we call NCATE, and which several of you may have heard of. That organization has merged with another organization, and over the next year, they are becoming an organization called CAPE, which is the Council for Accreditation of Educator Preparation. But they will serve the same national accreditation function that NCATE has served. In Indiana, if institutions seek national accreditation and go through that rigorous process, which also includes a site visit by educators, teacher educator professionals, sometimes drawn from all over the country. If those institutions are awarded national accreditation, that also meets our state accreditation requirements. So those institutions are not required to do a duplicate effort to go through reviews for both approvals. Over the past year, Marian University and Taylor University have gone through NCATE accreditation visits and that review process, and in April at the National NCATE Board meeting, both of those institutions were awarded NCATE accreditation. Based on that national accreditation status, Marian and Taylor both meet our state requirements for continuing accreditation of their educator preparation programs. So we would recommend today that based on their national accreditation awards, that you approve ongoing state accreditation status for both of those programs.
Any questions for Risa? Seeing none, then there's a motion to approve continuing Marian University's state accreditation status for its teacher preparation program. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I have a question. Go ahead, Dr.
Yes,
Freitas.
go ahead.
I wanted to note that the Marian University accreditation decision was made with no areas for improvement. And so they met all the national standards, and it's very rare in the country to have an institution come forth with no areas for improvement. So wanted to share that with the public, that it's a rare and an affirmation of the great program they have at Marian University.
Yes. Vince?
Yeah, just a question. With respect to accountability, when we look at K-12 school accountability and what we expect in terms of student outcomes, how are student outcomes measured with respect to the accreditation of teacher education programs?
You know, the link of student outcomes to teacher preparation is something that that is evolving, that really has just started to be more important to the accreditation of teacher education over the last couple of years. CAPE has adopted new accreditation standards as they go forward as the accrediting body in the future that looks at K-12 student achievement and student growth to a greater degree in the accreditation process of teacher education programs. And in Indiana, last year, in 2014, the General Assembly passed House Enrolled Act 1388, which is a teacher preparation accountability bill that also ties student growth and achievement data and teacher evaluation data into the approval process for teacher education programs. So both at the national level and the state level, that is something that we will be seeing more of.
So Risa, could you get that to the new state board members, because it's a matrix, and we've already had conversation with all the higher education input, and so that actually is, we took action on that a little while back, not necessarily.
Right, you initiated rulemaking based on
actually
some draft
yes,
standards.
based upon the draft.
Yes, yes, we'll be happy to get that.
Yeah, why don't you do that, because that would be very helpful to
Sure.
all of you.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Bertram?
Yes.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Hendry?
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski?
Yes.
Mr. Melton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
Yes.
Superintendent Ritz?
Yes. Now we have a motion to approve continuing Taylor University state accreditation status for its teacher preparation program. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Bertram?
Yes.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Hendry?
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski?
Yes.
Mr. Melton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
Yes.
Superintendent Ritz?
Yes. Motion approved. The next item on the agenda is the resolution recognizing Robert Guffin for his service.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and the resolution says the board expresses its great appreciation to Robert Guffin for his service and wishes him the best in his future endeavors. Any discussion? Yes.
I would just like to echo what's contained in the resolution, that Bob was a great service to us for the year that he served as executive director to the State Board of Education. Extremely dedicated to his job. Definitely worked more than 40 hours a week. So, Bob, if you happen to be watching, first off, I question your judgment. But second off, I want to congratulate you on your service and your dedicated service to the state of Indiana. Thank you.
All right, seeing no more discussion, roll call, please.
Dr. Bertram?
Yes.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Hendry?
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski?
Yes.
Mr. Melton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
Yes.
Superintendent Ritz?
Yes. Next, we have a series of resolutions regarding service honoring the previous State Board of Education members. With permission, I actually would like to read each of these resolutions to give acolytes to each of these members. So the first one is a resolution honoring Ms. Andrea Neal. Whereas Andrea Neal has served with distinction as a member of the Indiana State Board of Education representing the 5th Congressional District. Whereas Andrea Neal has also served with distinction as a history and English teacher at St. Richard's Episcopal School in Indianapolis. Whereas Andrea Neal has served with distinction as an adjunct scholar with the Indiana Policy Review Foundation. Whereas Andrea Neal has displayed a passion for educating Indiana students and an appreciation of the importance of certain subject areas such as civics and Indiana history. And whereas Andrea Neal has faithfully executed her duties to the state of Indiana. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the board recognizes the distinguished service that Andrea Neal has given for the benefit of Indiana's students, schools, educators, communities, and families, and be it further resolved that the board expresses its deep appreciation to Andrea Neal and wishes her the best in her future endeavors. So moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Gordon?
I would just like to say publicly that Andrea was my seatmate, so she was the closest to me for about 2 years, and even though we didn't agree on every issue, she was, I think, a terrific addition and voice here at the table at the State Board of Education. So I just want to publicly thank her for her service to the state. I think she did a great job, and wish her all the best.
Carrie?
And to comment on all of the former board members, and there'll be resolutions for them. I've been lucky to have served with the previous members who are leaving us, some from before that. You know, it's a lot of work. Andrea once mentioned, you know, when I went in for an interview, they said it'd be 1 day a month, and it's not 1 day a month. It's all this homework and all of this time and extra meetings and emergency meetings but it's an honor, and it's an honor to get to work with each other, and it's a small world in education, and so I know everybody's paths will cross again, but just really appreciate all of the time that they do put into it. And as Gordon said, you know, we don't always all agree. Sometimes Brad would kick me under the table even once in a while, you know, and so, but it's everybody's very passionate about it, and I appreciate that. Everybody genuinely cares about the kids in education and wants what's best for them, even though we might see it through a different lens. And so thanks to all of them.
Thank you, Carrie. Yes, David?
Just want to make one comment about Andrea, that I could always rely on her to bring in the out-of-the-box thinking. And sometimes during a meeting for several hours, that when Andrea would speak up, it would be out of the box. It'd be something new, something unique. And if everyone had the same view, same perspective, we wouldn't need to be sitting here. We'd just have one person being the board, and that'd be it. And so I think with Andrea's out-of-the-box thinking, we made some decisions over the past 2 years that were richer, that were smarter, and that they were better for kids, frankly. So I appreciate Andrea, and if you're listening, thank you, and wish you the best.
On behalf of the board, yes, we do thank Andrea Neal for her service. Roll call, please.
Dr. Bertram?
Yes.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Hendry?
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski?
Yes.
Mr. Melton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
Yes.
Superintendent Ritz?
Yes. The next resolution is honoring Dr. Daniel Elsner. Whereas Dr. Elsner has served with distinction as a member of the Secretary of the Indiana State Board of Education representing the 7th Congressional District. Whereas Daniel Elsner has served with distinction as chairperson of the board's turnaround committee. Whereas Daniel Elsner has served with distinction as a member of the Indiana Education Roundtable. Whereas Daniel Elsner has served with distinction as Secretary, Executive Director of the Office of Catholic Education of the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. Whereas Daniel Elsner currently serves with distinction as President of Marian University. And whereas Daniel Elsner has expressed a strong desire for the success of all Indiana students and has tirelessly worked to improve education for those students in low-performing schools. Now therefore it be resolved that the board recognizes the distinction service of Daniel Elsner has given for the benefit of Indiana students, schools, educators, communities, and families, and be it further resolved that the board expresses its deep appreciation to Daniel Elsner and wishes him the best in his future endeavors. So moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Comments? Roll call, please.
I have one comment.
Oh, sorry, Gordon.
What to say about Dan Elsner? I know a lot of us know that he's a shy and unassuming man. I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, it was a privilege to get to know Dan over the course of the past couple of years, and I think he was extremely dedicated to the kids of Indiana, and in some respects, I view him as having been the conscience of the board. And I know it goes back to his strong Catholic faith that he is just enormously passionate about kids, especially the underprivileged and those who are in underperforming schools. And I think that really came through in his passion for making changes to Indiana's educational system. So again, just an honor to get to know Dan. I wish him well. He's an outstanding president of Marian University, and I wish him all the best.
David?
Somewhat ironic that we just approved Marian University's teacher education program. And Dan, if you're listening, you didn't have to leave the board in order for us to to not be influenced by you. But I saw Dan as the North Star, that he kept us on track. And when Andrea would take us off into new directions, Dan would bring us back. And so they were really a good team. And I have the highest respect for him and thought he's been really an outstanding board member over many years prior to my time.
Other comments? Roll call, please.
Dr. Bertram?
Yes.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Hendrick?
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski?
Yes.
Mr. Melton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
Yes.
Superintendent Ritz?
Yes. The next resolution is honoring Mr. Troy Albert. Whereas Troy Albert has served with distinction as a member of the Indiana State Board of Education representing the 9th Congressional District. Whereas Troy Albert has served with distinction as a teacher of math and physical education for 13 years. Whereas Troy Albert has served with distinction as principal of Fremont High School and Westview High School. Whereas Troy Albert currently serves with distinction as principal for the Henryville Junior-Senior High School. And whereas Troy Albert has devoted much of his life to the service of Indiana students and educators and has tirelessly worked to improve education in Indiana. Now therefore be it resolved that the board recognizes the distinguished service that Troy Albert has given for the benefit of Indiana students, schools, educators, communities, and families. And be it further resolved that the board expresses its deep appreciation to Troy Albert and wishes him the best in his future endeavors. Do I have a second? Any comments? Gordon?
I'm going to make a comment about every departing board member, by the way.
That's
So,
fine.
I really enjoyed getting to know Troy over the last couple of years. And again, we did not always agree on the policy, but when he spoke up, he had really a lot of important information to share. And I greatly appreciate his service on the board and what he brought to the table over the course of the past couple of years. And he was the only board member who wore cowboy boots to every board meeting. I'm not sure anyone here, any of the new members will, but I always appreciated his sense of style. Anyway, so again, just Troy, greatly appreciate your service and wish you all the best.
Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Dr. Bertram?
Yes.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Hendry?
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski?
Yes.
Mr. Melton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
Yes.
Superintendent Rich?
Yes. The next resolution is honoring Dr. Brad Oliver. Whereas Dr. Brad Oliver has served with distinction as the member of the Indiana State Board of Education representing the 6th Congressional District. Whereas Dr. Brad Oliver has served with distinction as a member of the Board's Strategic Planning Committee. Whereas Dr. Brad Oliver has served with distinction as an Indiana elementary school teacher and principal and has served as a central office administrator in 2 Indiana school districts, including Muncie Community Schools from 2004 to 2008. Whereas Dr. Brad Oliver has served with distinction as Dean of the School of Education Leadership at Indiana Wesleyan University. And whereas Dr. Brad Oliver has displayed a tireless passion for serving Indiana students and educators. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board recognizes the distinguished service that Dr. Brad Oliver has given for the benefit of Indiana students, schools, educators, communities, and families, and be it further resolved that the Board expresses its deep appreciation to Dr. Brad Oliver and wishes him the best in his future endeavors. So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Comments?
Brad, I got to know Brad right after I was appointed, and you know, as a new board member who's not an educator, he was extremely helpful in helping me get up to speed on the very diverse and in-depth and challenging issues that we deal with on a monthly basis here at the State Board of Education. And he is totally passionate about the school children, teachers, administrators, everyone else in the Indiana educational system, and I am grateful to him for his service. And so, Brad, thank you and best wishes.
David?
Brad has many fine qualities in addition to a broad experience in education. I really appreciated, though, his service on strategic planning. We went through many issues that were really difficult and challenging, and Brad always brought details and data. He was a data person and could talk about the research on why we should do certain things in a certain way, and that's how I'll remember Brad. Sounds like a wig for all these people, but we're talking about key things that I think they brought to the board and to the special committees.
And if I can just add one last point, he was somebody who, again, we did not agree on every issue, and he's of the other party, of the other political party than myself, but he approached these issues as, you know, in a bipartisan way, and I just feel like we found common ground on a lot of issues that we might have started a little bit of apart, but we worked through them, and so for that I appreciate his spirit of working together on these difficult issues.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Bertram?
Yes.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Hendry?
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski?
Yes.
Mr. Melton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
Yes.
Superintendent Rich?
Yes. And our last resolution is honoring Mr. Tony Walker. Whereas Tony Walker has served with distinction as a member of the Indiana State Board of Education representing the 1st Congressional District. Whereas Tony Walker has served with distinction as a member of the Board's Turnaround Committee. Whereas Tony Walker has worked tirelessly to improve education in Indiana for all students, including students in low-performing schools. And whereas Tony Walker has faithfully executed his duties to the state of Indiana. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board recognizes the distinguished service that Tony Walker has given for the benefit of Indiana students, schools, educators, communities, and families. And be it further resolved that the Board expresses its deep appreciation to Tony Walker and wishes him the best in his future endeavors. So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any comments? Gordon? And then Eddie?
Oh, as the new 1st District, I'll let you comment.
Go ahead, Eddie.
Yeah, thank you. Wanted to definitely recognize and acknowledge the leadership, the hard work and dedication that Tony Walker contributed in this role. representing the 1st District. So I want to thank him for that service. And since I know Mr. Walker, I thank him for all he's done for the children and students in Northwest Indiana.
Thank you. Gordon?
Tony has been a great friend over the last couple of years to me, and I know he cares deeply about the school children in the state of Indiana, especially those who are in underperforming schools and need to find a better option. So it's been a privilege getting to know him over the course of the last couple of years. You know, I think that he's taken a lot of heat for some of the things that he's advocated, especially as a Democrat, as a fellow Democrat. But you know, and I would point specifically to the action that this board took as it relates to Dunbar-Pulaski earlier this year. While there were many advocating against the change that the board supported, it took great leadership for him to advocate for that position. So I think he had a lot of courage as a board member and as a member of the city of Gary to, in my view, put the interests of the children first. So I would commend him for his service, and I look forward to continuing to call him a friend. Thank you.
David?
Tony's leadership here represents the value of having a non-educator on the board. And so I turn to Eddie as a non-educator and reiterate how valuable that is. There's been 2 or 3 major decisions that we've made that I've read all the data, read all the information. I was pretty much, my mind was made up on how I was going to vote on a particular issue. Then Tony spoke up. From a non-educator point of view, he raised some other issues for me. And several times I changed my mind. And so, Eddie, you're sort of in that perch right now to bring that perspective to, sometimes we as educators don't know what's best. And sometimes having an outside perspective is really important. And lastly about Tony, something that Gordon just mentioned, that courageous leadership. It was difficult to close a school in Gary, Indiana. And it would have been much easier for Tony just to bow to political pressure and not take the adversity that faced him in his own community. But he did what was best for children in Gary, Indiana. So I'll always remember Tony with that moniker of courageous leadership.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Bertram?
Yes.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Hendry?
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski?
Yes.
Mr. Melton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
Yes.
Superintendent Ritz?
Yes. The next item of which we have business today is under discussion and reports. The first item, why don't we take a quick break though, and then when we return, we'll have discussion and reports. So let's resume here at 10:30. We are ready to resume our meeting. First item under discussion is the InTAST Indiana University contract for educator evaluation support to support districts and educators. Ashley, State Board of Education staff, if you would guide us in the discussion, please.
I sure will. So I'm going to walk you guys through an overview of this InTAST, Indiana Teacher Appraisal and Support System contract. The board has been working for quite a while in figuring out how we can implement some of the feedback with the support of the Department of Education and IU to follow through with some of the things we've heard from the field as areas of development and areas, I'm echoing a little bit, sorry, in areas of need in the state when it comes to educator evaluation. You have in your packets and your materials, and they're also posted online with the materials, a couple of different documents. The first one is the overview PowerPoint that I'm going to walk through. You also have a narrative document that kind of outlines the scope of work and what that looks and sounds like. I'm going to highlight a couple of components in this PowerPoint, but you have all the details there. You also have the draft contract so you can see what exactly that looks like. So the first point, over the past 6 or 7 months, there have been a number of surveys that have been conducted to gather feedback from the field as to what's going on with educator evaluation in the state. There have been 4 years of educator evaluation. It looks and sounds different according to which district you're in, but we were looking for some consistencies across districts in terms of feedback. And from the in-test survey that was conducted to the 2 board surveys that were conducted to the field, we had about 6,000 responses from educators sharing with us where they see areas of need and areas where educator evaluation can be strengthened, given that the field and us have had, at the state level, have had a few years to implement and figure out what's going on. In February, TNTP, a national nonprofit, made recommendations to the State Board of Education as to areas they see the educator evaluation system can be improved. The Strategic Planning Committee of the board and the strategic plan, they're under Goal 2 of the strategic plan, there's ongoing efforts to make sure that we're addressing areas of educator evaluation that maybe are not as strong as they can be, and making sure that with collective efforts of the Department of Education that we're addressing those to make sure that the field has everything they need to not only have effective and efficient evaluation systems, but that it feels good and appropriate for the educators. So from that work and the surveys that we received, the Strategic Planning Committee was looking at how do we actually address these concerns for the field. And in having collaborative conversations with Department of Education staff and IU, INTAS, the organization out of IU, is best served to address some of these needs. So in working in collaboration with the department, we figured out what makes sense. What would that scope of work look like so as to not duplicate any efforts that the Department of Education has going on, but collectively making sure that we have a nice full support system for the folks in the field. So what you see there is an outline of all of the things that we've collaborated on over the course of about 4 or 5 months to make sure that each of the projects are addressing the needs of the field. A few of those projects are highlighted in the PowerPoint, but again, your narrative document outlines this a little bit more. I just didn't want to have really beefy PowerPoint slides for you guys because sometimes it's hard to follow along. So the first main point is making sure that we have systems of recognition for districts that are implementing evaluation really well and could serve as models for the state. So that process is described for you in the narrative document. We also are looking at how to have educators more involved in evaluation. This varies across districts, but how can there be a nice set of recommendations or a how-to guide to ensure that districts are bringing teachers to the table when looking at reworking a teacher evaluation model or a teacher evaluation rubric, and making sure that they have large influence as this directly affects them in their work day to day. Eventually, there will also be recommendations made through this contract and this scope of work to streamline the teacher effectiveness rubric that's currently used as the model of the state to make sure that, number one, it's updated with our new standards, but also that it doesn't have duplicative elements through the teacher effectiveness rubric that we've been able to find over the course of time. So these are a couple of the main highlights of the contract. I do want to point out that Dr. Hardy Murphy, who is the lead, one of the leads on this scope of work, is here. If you guys have specific questions, Hardy's going to be the best person to answer. But in terms of process and collaboration with DOE, I can talk specifically about that when you have questions. I want to highlight a couple of next steps here. This contract will come before you guys in July. as an action item. This was really intended to be an educational session. We understand we have new board members and want to make sure that everybody is on the same page and understands why this is important, where it came from, and how we ended up here today. There are 4 members who serve on a management team to make sure that we have ongoing collaborative efforts. Myself from State Board staff, Sarah Peace, who's an educator effectiveness specialist at DOE, and Sandy and Hardy work through the process of the scope of work, or worked through the process of the scope of work to make sure that we are not duplicating any efforts across the state, and that this is filling the gap that we have, or gaps that we have, in terms of the educator evaluation systems in the state. So we call this the management team. The management team will continue as time goes on, and as we get to each part of the scope of work, to step back and say, what does this look and sound like? And this team is the team that will be responsible to you guys to report out on findings of research, which is a large component of this scope of work, and then also how things are going as trainings start to roll out, et cetera. So I just wanted to point out to you guys who will be reporting to you on an ongoing basis about the scope of work.
Questions for Ashley? Or Dr. Murphy? Dr. Murphy, why don't you stand so they know who you are? There's Dr. Murphy from IU with the INTAS project.
So I do have just one.
Yes, Leanne.
Just to clarify, so you will have teachers and administrators collectively working together, so you hear the voice from the teachers as well as administrators?
The survey results that we've received have been from all levels of educators. So we have lots, and actually to our surprise, the majority of the feedback came from teachers, but we have feedback from administrators, superintendents, and there's also a design, it's called the Stakeholder Design Committee, which is a group of about 20 folks who are reporting to the Strategic Planning Committee right now, who make up of teachers, administrators of all different levels, to say, here's how we see it can be improved, and that feedback from the field is largely driving how things look and sound and how processes work.
Thank you.
Yep.
And could I ask?
Yes.
And actually, a big part of this as well is that this team and what's going on here will help schools to better utilize their teachers in that process as well.
Correct.
Because I know that's a huge pain point for teachers is some schools do that well, some schools don't do that as well, and so I think that's really important, but that is a big piece of this, right?
Yes, so if you guys are not familiar with INTAS and their day-to-day work, one of their expectations when it comes to evaluation is that teachers be at the table. And this is maybe something that at the state level, as of course hindsight's 2020, that we did not really push and communicate well from the outset of teacher evaluation. And this is one of their philosophies that it absolutely has to be driven with teachers. So especially as we start to look at the teacher effectiveness rubric over time, what does that look and sound like? We see that we have, these indicators and that we've had these competencies within the RISE rubric, and they've been modified, of course, from district to district or customized or built from the district level. But does it look different 4 years out now? Are there things that we're not looking at or wanting to measure? Like non-cognitive skills would be an example that we could maybe strengthen the rubric with. And that will be lots of discussion and done over time.
Gordon?
I'd just like to say briefly that I'm excited about continuing this collaboration, that Dr. Cole and Dr. Murphy and INTAS have been enormously helpful in bringing their work to the State Board of Education, the Department of Education, and informing us on these very important issues. So look forward to continuing the collaboration.
Vince?
Yes, and I agree. I think this collaboration is very important. How do you see this work informing pre-service programs and those prospective teachers?
That's actually a really great question. Hardy, if you will. This has come up in the conversations on the management team and discussions on how do we make sure that what the expectation is once you enter the teaching profession, that there's guidance or best practices that are being shared back to the pre-service programs. And Hardy actually is the executive director for the Urban Schools Association and works with INTAS at IU, but he also teaches some undergraduate classes. And this recently came up in one of our conversations about how do we filter this to the pre-service programs. There is not a specific project for doing that, but I certainly think as we continue these conversations about the work over time, that in collaboration with DOE, we should figure out how we can make sure that pre-service programs or the educator programs across the state are receiving some level of support. It may be a best practices or guidance document, but that's to be determined, but certainly is something that's come on the radar as, hey, maybe we should be figuring out how an element of this work can support that. Certainly not giving directives or anything like that, but making sure that there's a document that makes sure the pre-service or the teaching candidates are well prepared to enter the profession and understand how the system itself works.
Dr. Murphy?
Well, certainly, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to continue our work with the State Board, with the State Board staff, and with the department staff also. We've had this collaboration going on now for, I guess, a few years now, and had an opportunity to work collaboratively with the State Superintendent on these issues. Ashley is correct. There is an opportunity here to inform pre-service education. Those systems have to be developed. Right now, what's emerging, we have the facts and the experiences of teachers out there with the system, as well as principals and others. So there are some things that we know have to be included in the pre-service education. For one thing, the whole assessment issue. How do you, in fact, set effective and reasonable learning targets for students? We know that teachers have to become better trained in the idea of developing assessments and translating the results of those assessments into instruction in a formative sense. We also think it's important for teachers to understand the expectations of the evaluation system. I know in working with my students, one of the things I'm getting back is, you know, if this had just been explained to us, we'd know a little more about it. So if you can envision a conversation where you have an evaluator talking with a teacher, and one of them understands all of the aspects of the evaluation system, the other one only knows what they've read and heard. That's a different kind of conversation to have. So we're talking about increasing the fluency of that conversation. That can only help the process. One of the other things that Ashley mentioned that we think is very important is that in terms of teachers being involved in this, we recommend to all of our districts, create an oversight committee, if you will, that includes teachers, principals, and others. Meet on a regular basis. Hash out the actual experiences in the field that you're having with your system. Make adjustments in it. Communicate to the teachers in your schools that these adjustments are being made and that their voices are being heard. We feel that a process where everyone is involved and engaged in a conversation about resolving issues and making the system work does two things. It supports and develops teachers. It changes the message so the teacher sees that this is a supportive system to increase their effectiveness. And ultimately, it gets at the one thing that we all agree upon, and that's that we need to improve our student learning. So that's the kind of process that we envision putting in place.
Well, it's a great point. I think, you know, when we think of instructional design, oftentimes we start with the assessment, correct?
Yes.
How are we going to assess student performance, and then we backward map and we plan instruction. It seems reasonable then we would do the same from a teacher perspective.
Absolutely.
Right. Here's how you're going to be assessed, evaluated. Here are the performance outcomes and the performance measures. Therefore, our instructional program should align with that.
Absolutely.
And it would seem irresponsible to me to allow student teachers and others to go through an entire process and not be so intimately engaged in the evaluation process.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we agree with you 100%. We actually feel that in terms of communicating not just to teachers and to people in the schools in our different corporations, but to our public at large, what has to make sense is that this experience is reflective of the experiences that others go through in their profession. And that experience is that there are professional expectations. They're fair, they're expectations that everyone understands, and those expectations make a difference in the product. And that product for us is student learning. So we feel that, if I may say this, we feel that this is the vehicle really for school improvement in the state of Indiana. If you can make it happen with the people who are responsible for ensuring that you have better outcomes and developing students, that generation of citizens that will sit at this table, that the teacher evaluation process is the way to do it. Everything else should spin off from that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more discussion? All right, thank you. We look forward to it next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is public hearings for Year 5 schools. So we have 3 schools coming up, and I'll let Teresa from the department address them a little bit. And for what I'd like to do is typically I have made sure that I go to each one of these. Okay, hearings. But we are going to, at the next board meeting, we're going to elect or select amongst us a vice chair and a secretary. So I would like, anytime that we have a public hearing like this, that at least either myself as the chair or the vice chair or the secretary perhaps attend to run the actual hearing. And so we'll just kind of keep that in mind as something that we might want to proceed with. But Teresa, why don't you address what these hearings are all about and why they are coming to us and approximate timelines on when they might take place.
Hi, I'm Teresa Brown, and I'm the Assistant Superintendent for School Improvement with the department. And under our new reorganization, Risa shared with you the areas that she oversees. And so within School Improvement, she's operational side of things, and I'm more programmatic. So I get to work with the college and career readiness folks, e-learning, special education, the outreach field staff, school turnaround, all the federal programs, title, et cetera, and all the federal grants. So those are the areas that fall now within School Improvement, which has been an amazing way to break down the silos and for all of us to work together to really drive the same improvement efforts across our whole division. So getting to your question about Year 5 schools, we do have 3 that are up, and this is dictated by statute that when a school enters 5 years of consecutive lowest category placement, or in this case an F, that they are required to have a hearing held within their community to give the community a chance to respond to what options from the 5 that are dictated in statute that they would like to have considered for their school. So things like closing a school, having a charter, merging with a higher performing school, a lead partner, we've done that before, turnaround school operators, and then other recommendations made by the department. So any of those things can be options that you as a board will decide for schools if they enter into Year 6. And so this is really just preparing to make sure that we have all of the information up front so that if Year 6 happens, we're ready to make a decision. So that's the purpose of the Year 5 hearing. Typically, we do them before the grade placement, the Year 6 grades come out. We know that those are going to be later in the fall. And so, it's kind of at your pleasure when you would like to have these hearings. We were thinking it would be nice to have it first 3 weeks of August, somewhere in that time frame. If that works with schedules, we have to coordinate obviously with you and with the schools. So it's kind of at your pleasure when you'd like to have those hearings.
All right, thank you. Any questions or discussion? All right, thank you, Teresa. The next item is assessment update, and I believe you were handed a document over the break. So we have some questions and discussion that's requested on formative assessment, but prior to that, you have in your packet that was sent to you a timeline for post ISTEP Spring 2015 ISTEP post-assessment estimated timeline. And so I would like to call your attention to September. September, we were trying to work to establish a date in September for our board meeting that will accommodate the cut score timeline, rather than having 2 meetings in September, and whereby when we have it in September, do you guys have this timeline? We sent it electronically. Oh, you've got it? Okay, so keep looking. Okay, all right. Then you notice that we're recommending the State Board of Education meeting on September 16th, 2015. Is that still a Wednesday? Oh, I believe it is. And that at that one meeting, we would like to have approval of the cut scores at that time. So we would not have the September, it might have been the first Wednesday in September. We would not have that meeting. Instead, we would have September 16th as being our September meeting. Unless you see any big objections to that, you could get with the State Board of Education staff, but that's our recommendation that we do that. So we're going to be in line to get these grades out as quickly as we can because we are making new cut scores on an entirely new assessment. So, yes, Sarah?
Just a quick question. I see that in August is when we are doing the paper pencil versus the online comparative
Yes.
studies. Will we be guaranteed to have the results back from that study before we're actually setting cut scores in September, before that process begins?
We'll take that, I believe we will, but We'll take that back to Michelle for sure, and we'll
Okay.
send out the answer to you.
Okay. I just think when we're looking at broad month-based, but
You
I want to make
betcha.
sure we're not doing that in the end of August and then jumping the gun on.
Correct.
what we're doing.
I believe it has to be done in this order.
Right.
These things are in order to happen as we go. So I would say the answer is yes, but if there's a different answer, I certainly will have Michelle answer the
appreciate
question.
it. Thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome. By the way, Michelle Walker is our assessment director, so any questions you have typically come through Corey Cochran. Corey, why don't you stand up so everybody knows who you are? There's Corey. He works for the Department of Education. He is the staff person that works for you from the department, and so you'll get emails from him. You can just email him back, or you can just email Danielle Shockey or myself, and we'll just make sure you get answers from the right personnel in our department when you have questions. Yes, Leanne.
So I know that there's, from building leaders and teachers, there's a lot of concern about the comparability between paper pencil and the online.
Sure.
And so having the information to us, as well as really making it in a clear way to share it with our school folks, will really be important.
Okay. We'll get all of that back to Michelle. Any other questions about the assessment timeline? All right. Well, I know we have some questions regarding formative assessment. So Danielle, I know you're here to answer any questions regarding that. And so why don't I let you start, and then you can ask your questions as a board member.
All right, thank you, Superintendent Ritz, and welcome to the new board members, and hello to all of you that I get to talk to frequently. I'm Danielle Shockey. I'm the Deputy Superintendent at the department, and so my role at the department is actually leadership and support of both of the lady assistant superintendents that you just heard from today. So basically every division they describe that they oversee, I work with them, and I'm the conduit to the executive team level, which includes the superintendent, the chief of staff, our legal arm, our governmental affairs arm, and our finance. So that's my role as the deputy superintendent, and as the superintendent mentioned, I certainly want to be the front line for you. If you have any questions or any person in the department you need to meet with, seek deeper knowledge on, I'd be happy to find that subject matter expert for you. So with that being said, I do want to talk to you a little bit about the formative assessment and give you some background information. You know, we removed the consent item, which was simply a funding formula. So I do want to, obviously, again, answer anything that you may have to ask, but I think I might be able to give you some information on the front end that might bring some of our new members up to speed on what is formative assessment in Indiana, what is funded, how it's been historically funded, and so forth. So I'll start with that, and then we'll talk about this as long as we need. So in Indiana, the formative assessment system has been a part of our testing system since 2007. In 2008-9, the Department of Education began funding Acuity, which would be the 3, 8, and 10 at the time, assessment that was the formative assessment for ELA, mathematics, science, and social studies. We've been doing that for 7 years. The same thing with M-Class. Beginning in 08-09, the department started funding M-Class, which is a formative assessment tool that is primarily used in K1 and 2 for English language arts and mathematics. So that has always been the formative tools offered to the schools and paid for through the department's budget.
For our listeners, could you explain what a formative assessment is?
I certainly can. So a formative assessment, and for the educators, and I believe all of us have enough, certainly, classroom knowledge to understand that the formative tools in Indiana, and I'm guessing in other locations as well, are used to inform classroom instruction. These are given multiple times throughout the school year. So unlike I-STEP, which is summative, meaning it's the end, it's did you pass and meet an expectation, the formative is designed to provide diagnostic information to the classroom teacher and the school as a whole and the corporation as a whole as to how students are doing on the grade level content. A formative tool should also be adaptive in nature. That means it goes above grade level and below grade level. So as I'm sitting there as a third grade student, it should provide the third grade teacher information, even if I'm not reaching third grade standards, where am I performing? And where are my specific deficit areas or challenge areas? And where are my areas for which I'm excelling and I might need to be pushed a little further? So it's designed to go in both perspectives and guide the classroom instruction. Is that, Superintendent, what you're hoping for?
Thank you, yes.
Okay, yes. And it's certainly important now, and the shift, I think, for us at the department philosophically, under the superintendent's leadership, is really aligned to even the new design of our standards. Our standards now measure at a deeper level of rigor and a deeper level of application of knowledge than maybe the old standards of before, where it was very skill-specific. Now we're trying to really seek, are our students mathematicians? Are they learners? Are they readers and writers? So we really want to use the formative tool to begin looking at that holistic learner approach and less about testing individual skill sets. So I talked to Carrie this morning a little bit about this, and I guess a desire for me as a past classroom teacher would be, I want a tool that I know my child and my students and my own children are going to be successful on any summative assessment that might come before them. So in our minds at the department, a good formative tool will do that. It will help an educator understand, will my students be successful, and where areas where they aren't, how can I help provide them the intervention necessary? So with that soapbox part of this explanation, I think we all understand where we're headed with formative and what formative tools exist in Indiana. I can tell you some data. Currently in Indiana, 90% of our schools use the Acuity platform for formative assessments that have been provided by the Department of Education. There are also many school corporations in Indiana who, outside of the Acuity that is paid for, the 90% who use it, also fund other formative tools. I know here in the last 18 months we've received notification from a large body of superintendents from the state of Indiana who were seeking to find out why couldn't the formative, or frankly, why couldn't the summative assessment in Indiana really come from a different body? And in that case, the letter was really around the NWEA tool. So we have a lot of schools who are paying for NWEA and being provided the Acuity. So much of this conversation was born out of all of this knowledge. And then through legislative session, the funding mechanism for formative assessment has shifted. So right now, the new budget, which will take effect July 1st, has afforded the department monies to give to grants to local schools for them to choose a formative tool. So now, rather than the department choosing the Acuity as we have in the past, or the M-Class, we are able to give locals a choice. And I know that actually was something also that kind of came from this Board of Education. Sarah O'Brien several months ago, and I don't know that you knew that Senator Kinley and the department and others were having that same kind of conversation, but you suggested, why can't this be an option for schools to choose whether they want to use X product or Y product? So that's where we are. We are in an exciting place. We've talked to many stakeholders, superintendents, educators. We have a testing advisory committee for whom we've actually engaged with already to say we have this opportunity through the grant money afforded to the department to give you local options on what formative tools you choose. So with that being said, we were coming forth today, and we will come back in July after we've had some more opportunity to converse about this, with a funding formula. And I want to talk to you a little bit about why the funding formula you did receive was just focused narrowly on 310. That's one question we've been asked and certainly are ready to answer, and certainly provide more dialogue if you'd like. So the buckets of money afforded to the department, we actually have a couple different pots of money. We have this amount that specifically said for a grant for formative assessments. In the budget language, it did not call out 310, but I can tell you in conversations with Senator Kinley, this was really aligned for him to Senate Bill 566. 566, which has now moved on to summer study, is around the idea of how can we look at summative assessment differently. And so the link there was really the grade levels that are required for current testing for summative, which is 310. So with that being said, that's part of the conversation. The other part of the conversation for us at the department around this process has been the pots of money that we have, and really maximizing the amount of money that we can provide to the locals for choice. So we have this $12 million that was afforded to us to give to grants to schools for formative assessment choice. We also have a pot of money at the department called early intervention. Early intervention monies is a pot of $4 million afforded to the department to also give to schools. It's typically also been in a grant process. So that's another pot of money for which we can fund formative assessments in grades K1 and 2. And then in the same language where we are afforded the $12 million for the formative assessments, there's also an additional $310,000 that is specifically called out for spending for the CCR exam. And the CCR exam is in another bill called House Bill 1005. And so that $310,000 is for the AccuPlacer exam. So when you look at those pots of money, we are not trying to exclude any grade level, but rather maximize all the monies to give the local choice. So with what I described, the place they do not have a choice would be with the AccuPlacer at grade 11 and 12, and that is because House Bill 1005 has called for that to be the CCR exam. So I feel like I've said a lot. I do want to also talk one more thing about the numbers. So the chart we gave you was not based on ADM, and I want to explain why that was not based on ADM. That was a question we were asked. ADM is collected twice a year from our schools, and this budget language, excitingly so, is giving money to all schools for formative assessment tool choice. So if we used ADM, that would discount certain pockets of our school populations. So this is actually the number we use is the number we're using for our contract negotiations for assessment for ISTEP. So these numbers include all public, all charter, the blind, the deaf school, the non-public, freeway accredited, and choice schools. Had we used the ADM count, we would have been excluding about 147,000 students. So this count, again, because it's been suggested why not ADM, and I just wanted to give that information for why not ADM, but rather the count we did use.
Questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Sarah.
Danielle,
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Well, let's do Sarah first, and
Okay.
then Steve.
Every time this topic comes up, I'm going to share my appreciation again. I think that this is exactly the direction that we should be heading, and I'm so appreciative that we're going there. I do appreciate the background on the grade levels, because that was one of my questions. Sure. Why are we excluding the K through 2? And I certainly appreciate the explanation there and a better understanding of where the different funds come from. My only caution is that we find a way to streamline the process as much as we can for the schools, that we figure out the piles of money on the back end, but that it is, in the spirit of finding ways to streamline data collection and all of that. I think if we can find one way for schools to apply for the monies, and then on the department end, figure out where exactly it comes from. But my preference would be to see that everything coming forward from here doesn't simply say 3 through 10, that it is a broad-based K through 10, but that, again, on the school end, we figure out where the separate money has to come from.
Excellent point, and that's similar feedback. Like I said, we talked to the Testing Advisory Committee, so we too agree that we need a process,
right,
but we don't want to make it a cumbersome process. Right. We want to assure that the dollars are being spent in the way that the budget language, frankly, is being afforded to us, and so we have to be responsible back to, I believe we have to take a report back to the state budget agency, and our funding formula has to go to the budget committee. Right. So we have to have some process for which we can assure that the monies were spent the way we were suggested.
So part of the conversation, which is why the consent agenda was taken off right now, is that our early learning grant for literacy does not require the same process as this one does.
Okay.
Okay. So yes, it's a different funding mechanism, and we may actually have to treat it separately. It wouldn't be our first thought to do that. Right. To your grant idea, though, I will let you know that the grant is looking into how we can offer what we call a unified grant system, so that really information that you put in will start to populate every time that you submit a grant. So we are looking at streamlining the technology pieces for grant transmission. So we're beginning that conversation, but we may have some technical issues, right, as to how each of the grants and the funds were given to us and how they must be distributed and how that happens and what comes to the board. And so that's why we removed the consent agenda item for now.
No, I appreciate that. And I think that especially as schools are starting to have those conversations
Correct.
With the companies and looking for their own individual board approval for the routes that they take,
Sure.
I think as much as we can find a way to just compile it together and have one plan for them to attack on
Sure.
the assessment.
And to that point, I think when we hear grant, we think of application multi-page.
Right.
What we're really seeking here is an assurance document. We are seeking assurances
Very
that
simple.
whatever
Very
tool you
simple.
are choosing, really just fulfills the criteria of a formative tool,
Right.
which is on the document that was left, we had that break, that it's adaptive in nature and diagnostic
And I
and so
might
forth.
also add, it will be up to the locals themselves to decide which grade levels they may want to use them for, how they want to do their own schedules. At the state level, we will not be saying, here's when you're doing your formative assessment in any way. So it really will be locally driven with local decisions on what it is that they would like their formative assessment to look like. But we do have funding available, for the full gamut.
And I would think that that would impact their negotiations as well. When you're looking at
You
total
betcha.
cost of a system, if you're testing a further range of students,
Sure.
it's got to be a cheaper
Sure.
per student than 1 or 2 grade levels.
Yeah. Steve?
I would echo Sarah, thank you for the comments and concerns. And anything, Superintendent, you can do to streamline the grant
Oh, yeah,
process
I know.
would be welcomed throughout the state. So I
We
appreciate those
We are
efforts.
headed there.
Good, that's great. Summer Study Committee, is there a timeline for that, and who's on that?
You know what, we just received last week, Corey Cochran is in the room, or Scott Reske, if either of you want to answer that. We just received notification a little bit from the General Assembly in terms of the summer study. I don't know if we have any details that you're ready to share.
Do we have any timelines yet, Corey? No? Sometime in August? Okay.
And so we'll ask who's interested when we know a little bit more, if that's something you're seeking.
Terrific, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Senate Bill 566 is really exploring the conceptual notion that you can take your formative assessment, and even if you have to add something to the very last component of it, that it could meet the guidelines of the federal requirements. So we have to have quite a bit of conversation with that, but I'm actually hoping that our Congress will reauthorize No Child Left Behind, which is headed towards flexibility for states and the assessment that they use. And so we're looking forward to that, perhaps.
Sure. And sorry, I just wanted to add on to that, if I may, Superintendent. We, as another part of this conversation on this formative tool and this formative option, the department is seeking some research opportunities.
Yes.
So as Indiana has this, we feel like we're going to be uniquely poised to have that federal conversation to prove that a good formative tool with maybe an additive summative component at the end could fulfill the requirements without having a separate summative exam as we have in ISTEP. So we want to do some study while we do this formative choice statewide.
Vince?
2 questions, thank you. One is on, and I completely agree with the idea of flexibility at a local level and giving schools the opportunity to select formative assessments. When that happens, and if that happens, what do you think are the lost economies of scale? And are there ways for us to recapture those economies, and particularly with acuity?
Sure.
And what that may mean at a local level? And the other question really deals with the skill development as formative assessments, in 3 through 10, and then we get to the AccuPlacer at 11 and 12 around college and career readiness, but also understanding that college and career readiness isn't something developed at grade 11 and 12, right? So how is CCR assessed throughout the system from very early ages so that when we get to grade 11 and 12, we're assured that students have those skills?
Sure. So Vincent, you hit on the exact thing about why this formative assessment and the guidelines and the criteria that we're talking about are so important. Because along the way, at every grade level, when students need remediation, then there should be immediate action on what we need to do with students as we work along. And then you should see improvement. That's why why it being adaptive is so important, so that we can see where students actually are performing at every grade level. And that's not just to work with the students with remediation, because you want to reduce that number. That's the whole point, is that kids will not need remediation when they leave our school and go on to post-secondary work. So, but we also want to advance every child as far as they can go. So you have to have that kind of knowledge piece. So I'm gonna let you answer his question, because I know you have additional information, but that's the whole point, that the formative assessment drives what we do in teaching, and you want those components to be there. And I will also tell you, it's my hope that we, with our development of our grade 10 test that we're going to have in mathematics and language arts, that we will, with a good formative assessment that's happening in schools, along with the proficiency types of exams that we'll have at grade 10, that we will not even need a grade 11 and a 12 kind of piece, that your grade 10 assessment, you should be able to know what it is that students need to have in those next 2 years to be able to graduate with competency. And I'll let you add to that.
Sure. And I appreciate the question, Dr. Bertram. I think I would have added just this notion that really that CCR distinction that I made at grade 11, 12 wasn't because we see a distinction. We actually, frankly, would see the entire formative assessment system grade K on to be really all about CCR, college and career readiness. But I made that distinction because it specifically is called out in the budget bill that $310,000 was for a CCR exam, which in 1005 has been identified as something different. So again, I did not mean to imply that we were seeking college and career readiness at grade 11, 12, and frankly, as the superintendent just described, the notion of 11th grade AccuPlacer is something that we've both publicly been concerned about because, again, we know our schools are doing a lot of work to determine what needs students have well before 11th grade. And frankly, that's, like the superintendent mentioned, is a little bit too late. We need to have the formative tools all along. And so,
thank you.
And with your other question, as other board members can chime in. So we've just completed an RFP process. An RFP process is a process very driven by state governmental I don't know, processes, if you will, for a lack of a better word, that's actually outside of the department, and all RFP processes are run through the Department of Administration. So when we sought in Indiana to find new vendors to deliver our content of iStep, iRead, NICSIC, which is the special education exam, formative assessments, we had to go through an RFP process. So there were companies that bid on the formative assessments in Indiana. Then, meanwhile, session was happening and the funding for which formative assessments typically have been funded shifted and it moved to this local grant idea. So with that local grant idea, we can no longer be in the business of saying it has to be X vendor or X test. So that RFP process and the place and time in which all this kind of intersected does not allow for the economies of scale that you're describing to be led by the department. That doesn't mean that certain, obviously, vendors who may be obviously very popular in our state, we would, I would hope that locally, consortium-based, CIESC-led, that local corporations may be able to have some economies of scale conversations, but that because of the RFP and the IDOA process, it is something the department is not able to enter into, but the contracts have to be entered into locally at the school level through the grant process.
That doesn't mean there's not ways in which we can gather information from the vendors per se through the locals to really see what the scale up is and what that's working. In fact, that's the whole notion of doing some research.
And also making that information public
Mm-hmm.
in a way
And
that
how
their
it's
school
working.
districts know the kind of economies that were earned in one particular district. So if you have a large district that may have economies and are able to
negotiate,
get a particular contract, making sure that all of our smaller districts have that information as well as they go in negotiations.
Excellent. And we're going to do as much as we plan to offer several webinars through the months leading up to this actual come to finalization for locals to have those conversations with one another. We'll host the calls and we'll provide content information and a little bit of just details they may need on actually processing the grants and the dollars. But we hope to engage in those conversations. We just cannot be the conduit of that information. If that answers your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Carrie?
I actually had a question about whether the RFP process covered any of that, the negotiating, and if we could use any of that. So we've answered that. So then that leads me to kind of a timeline of when this is going to happen because, although last day is tomorrow, we're already getting things ready for next year.
Well, we were hoping to actually approve the amounts today. But as you can see, we're talking about funding sources, and so that will come before you at our first meeting in July. But we're going to be having some conversation because literally we may be able to go ahead and have the process begin because we only have to come before you before we distribute the money. So we may go ahead and find out that we can proceed with the application kinds of things, and we're hoping that we can still do that. Our goal, with approval today with the money, was to actually start that June 15th with the schools. So we will we're going to have our dialogue, and John Sneathens told me that we were going to get together like tomorrow, like right away, to get this working, and then bring the amounts to you that will be distributed in July. But we may actually be able to begin the process. Part of the issue that we're dealing with also with this grant mechanism is that all schools may not want to take advantage of this. And all schools may not want to take advantage to the same length as other schools. So even though you offer it, we don't know the exact amount. So we just have some technical things to work through with how the grant language was written, but we'll work through those things. But our goal is to start this as soon as possible. So I know I'm very cognizant that we have school districts who are not in a position to enter into contracts with vendors and not know that the money's right there ready to go, and can't wait for a reimbursement kind of feature. So we are very diligent about getting this out right away, but I think we can probably move ahead and hopefully move ahead on the actual process for approving all of these and then bringing the money to the board in July. Yes, Leanne?
So one of my first questions, when you talk about the $4 million from early intervention, is that the same pot of money that typically we go through John Wolf for early intervention grants? So right now, quite a bit of that funding is going for the intervention materials for K2. Is that correct?
I don't know the exact, yes, it certainly is a choice right now, and I do know it's being used in a variety of ways across our state, and John is the administrator right now of that grant, yes.
And so if it goes to assessments, then that really is going to put the districts at a loss for some intervention materials?
So I have some data on the number of districts that are using M-Class, and so we don't anticipate the 90% like we have with Acuity. Okay. And so do we expect that, given the data that we know, which is the fact that there are 206 schools who currently use M-Class. Now, again, are those the same schools who also use the early intervention dollars for maybe other ways? I don't know. But we do know that the numbers who use M-Class is not as great as Acuity. So we don't expect that $4 million will be depleted by those choosing to have a formative tool in K2. Plus, we also have, that will remain funded by the department, is the iRead K, the iRead 1, and the iRead 2. That is also information that is used, again, in literacy to provide formative information. So we don't expect, like I said, that to be depleted with this option.
Okay, and then my other comment, going back to the economies of scale, if I recall, in the e-learning area, they entered into like a $0 contract where they could negotiate so that, you know, I'm thinking of smaller districts that don't have as many students, and so if we could have the lowest cost and then still have a selection to enter into those agreements at a district level, we could offer more assessments for more students.
Sure. I'm looking to my legal staff just because of that IDOA process is so very legalized, and I don't want to say anything that's not appropriate. I can tell you, though, I was in a conversation and in a meeting between IDOA staff and our staff as we talked about these components of the RFP that are essentially being canceled because they weren't funded, such as the formative. And so we did ask, could we in any way do what you just described? Could we host regional summits? Could we do a variety of things to try to do what either you or Dr. Bertram are suggesting? And the response really was that for the that it was not recommended because of the process for which the RFP and the legal attachments that come along with that. And if I answer any more, I'm going to be well out of my league. So, Michael, anything you would like to add to that?
As Danielle described, I'm sorry, my name is Mike Moore. I'm Director of Legal Affairs for the department. As Daniel described, when the state purchases things like supplies and services, we have a kind of a complex control process that DOA controls. When local schools purchase things, they have less rigid rules, but if the department somehow recommends a vendor or gets involved in the choosing of a vendor, then we might sidestep the RFP process, so we have to be really careful how we do that. So we have to create the guidelines for the program, and the school's going to purchase the programs as they choose fit per their guidelines, their purchasing rules.
Yes, Vince?
I have a suggestion, and while it may not be for the department, perhaps it could be for others. But if we put together, someone puts together 3 or 4 of 5 of our largest school districts that represent a large percentage of students and allow them to negotiate their contract, and then allow them to share with everyone else exactly what they were able to get in that contract. And that would position our smaller school districts in a favorable way, as opposed to having to negotiate on their own.
We have that exact same thought, and we were seeking to potentially use some of our partnerships, like the Indiana School Principals Association,
Yes.
or the Superintendents Association, and so your suggestion would be a similar suggestion that we hope is born out of their dialogue.
And schools can do that. They can jointly purchase services together through a
Sure.
joint purchasing
And we do have the
agreement.
service centers.
Service centers,
Sure.
co-ops, those kind of things. So they do this routinely.
Yes.
It's not uncommon.
It needs to be public, where they know, where the others have the information. So,
Sure. Right.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any more questions? Great discussion.
Thank you.
The next item is school quality review reports for year 4. Teresa?
So year 4 reports, much like the year 5 hearings, is from statute. We're required to do a report on schools that have had 4 consecutive years of F, and then we follow that up in their 5th year by helping them with their school improvement plan to implement the next steps. So we had 5 schools that required a review. You've received 4 of the reports. 2 were from our team internally. We had 6 members from the Department of Education and from the state board staff and community members, educational leaders that served on our teams. We've done 3 of those reviews, and then the other 2 were from Mass Insight. They did the one in Evansville, and Advanced Ed did the one in Northern Indiana in Gary Community Schools. So you have 4 of the 5 reports. The 5th one will be coming to you in July. We just finished the last review last week, so that's why you don't have that report yet. I guess, you know, I don't expect that you've read 153 pages yet, but if you have any questions about those reviews.
And certainly at any time, we can get you in contact with Teresa to answer any questions. Gordon,
Would you
have?
mind providing a brief overview of each school for us?
Okay. So I can talk to you about the 2 that you have that are from our review team, the Mass Insight and the Advanced Ed. I really can't speak about how they put together their teams as much. But I can tell you from our standpoint what we did and the highlights. So our first school, Block Middle School, up in East Chicago, our team of 6, each one was a team of 6, went to the school. We spent 3 days. We did pre-work. We did orientations for team members, orientations for school staffs. And we spent 2 days on site, 3 days working as a team to do the pre and then the during the visit and the post work writing on the turnaround principles. So that's what you see reflected in your report, are the 8 turnaround principles and how, based on our 26-page rubric, the school scores. So we gave you kind of the final piece for each one of them. On the beginning of each report are the highlights. So you will see the turnaround principles that we're choosing to call first priorities. So within Block Middle School, leadership was a concern, and school climate and culture was a concern. Discipline was a huge issue. And in addition to that, data, the way they were using data within their school to drive decision making. So there were a number of things, and if you look at the report, there are a number of systems that we found that just needed to be shored up. As a department, we had a debrief, and the state board staff with their central office and their leadership team before we left, so that they knew, even though they didn't have the report yet, they knew what we had found. They knew the first priorities that we were going to identify. It's a pretty rigorous process. We observe every single classroom. We interview every single staff member. So we spend a lot of time gathering evidence and data, and that's what we use. So it's not about the presence of a system, but it's whether or not they're having impact with their system. That's what we're measuring during the review. So again, at Block, those were the key findings. There's a lot of particular specifics under each one of those that I could spend hours talking about, but you can kind of get from the gist of it that leadership, school climate and culture, discipline is huge, and the data, that they're not using it to drive instruction. And there are some missing programs, how they're serving their English learners. There are some just different things within that school that are not working. So we have already been in contact with that superintendent. In fact, he replied after he received the report They've begun work on that. We've already sent department staff from our English Learner Division actually to go help them begin initiating a system that makes sense. We're also including East Chicago in our state development network that's starting, and that's a new initiative that I can talk about some other time, but basically we have 9 school districts that we're working on turnaround with that have 50% or more of focus on priority schools. So we're doing some real intensive work with districts now, not just local schools. And East Chicago is one that we've included in that. Because of that review, we know that they need some system work. So another one is IPS.
If I could just interject real quick, if you don't mind, Superintendent.
Sure.
So while we're talking about the Block Middle School, which is in East Chicago, I just want to highlight some of the things that were brought out in this report.
Sure.
Which I would characterize as fairly blistering. Maybe that's a little too strong, but if I might just highlight a couple points. Turnaround Principle 1, school leadership, ineffective.
Correct.
And there's a lot of data to support that. Under school climate and culture, improvement necessary. It's turnaround principle number 2. Turnaround principle number 3, effective instruction, ineffective.
Correct.
And finally, on turnaround principle number 4, curriculum, assessment, and intervention system, ineffective. I'm sorry, there's a couple additional. Turnaround principle number 5, effective staffing practices, improvement necessary. Use of data, improvement necessary. Turnaround principle number 7, effective use of time, improvement necessary. Turnaround principle number 8, effective family and community engagement, improvement necessary. So I think it's clear from this, very in-depth, it looks like a very thorough review by the department here that this school has some serious issues. And I guess my question is, since we're through 4 years, how does the new state legislation affect how this board should address this school? And we'll talk about the others as well.
So, the new state legislation actually begins, it's my understanding, if you haven't already been in that pipeline. Since they're already there, they stay within how their years are matriculating. So next year they'd be year 5,
gotcha.
And then year 6.
Okay.
So the superintendent of that district is absolutely aware of what you just said. And if he were here, he would say they were not surprised by what we found. They have grave concerns as well, and they're looking at reorganizing and doing some things differently in a pretty drastic way, I believe. So that's all I can tell you at this point, because I don't know what decisions they've made locally, but it is theirs to fix at this point locally. We're just providing them support because we know they need it. So like I said, we've already sent department staff there to work with them on the subpopulation issues they're having, and then we are including them in our state development network and giving them additional funds to help with professional development and some of their system issues that they have. We have given them extra funds to do that as well.
Well, even though the new state law grandfathers them and doesn't let the state board intervene immediately, I hope that we are kept very closely apprised as to the initiatives that are undertaken by the school, by the department, by state board staff, because I think I gave a very brief overview, but if you actually read the report, it's extremely disturbing, what the situation is, and I hope that there's an active and vigorous plan to correct some of these serious problems.
If I may ask, you have created an outreach department to support schools.
Right.
And so when you go and do quality review visits and you see you really have an underperforming school, do you leverage your outreach coordinators to support this school in ways that are different than how some other schools might be receiving some support?
Absolutely. And we do, our outreach coordinators are a part of the review teams so that they have the ability then to follow up with the schools as they continue working on school improvement, their school improvement plans. So we spend a lot of time with professional development and technical assistance. Like I said in the report, as we identify needs, the department comes in very quickly and helps them fix the systems that we see as being issues. Our early learning staff has already been up there. I'm sorry, our English learner staff has already been up there to work on special populations. We've also talked about special education with them as well. So we'll continue that work, and including them in the State Development Network will also be important because we can help them as a district look at the turnaround principles holistically. They have many systems. The district could be supporting them in a much greater way if they aligned. And they've had a lot of turnover, new superintendent, new assistant superintendent. They are currently advertising for a chief financial officer. They have a new PA they're looking for title. So their whole central office has really reconfigured, and many new building leaders. So they haven't had really an opportunity to address this yet, as they just received this from us, and they've only been on the job less than a year, most of them.
Okay. Thank you very much, Teresa.
Did you want to hear about IPS?
Oh, that's right.
It's the other one that we did, right? So then we have one more coming in July. So the one I gave you is School 93, George Fisher. So our review team, and Ashley, feel free to jump up here if you have anything you want to add. So Ashley and Bob were, Ashley attended the block, and Bob attended, no, you attended both of these, didn't you?
No, because I was getting married.
This one you were at 93. Yeah. So you were the two we're talking about. So so at 93 they had a lot of, again, challenges with leadership. They have a first-year principal who is not going to be back. They've already announced that. Actually, just a couple of days before we arrived for the review, the staff found that out. So I believe they just actually filled that position last week. There were a lot of concerns among the staff. They were very divided. They had a new initiative called Project Restore within their school, and it was designed to help them with discipline and to kind of get control back into the teacher's hands so they can teach, and so the students were removed when they're disruptive. That's resulted in thousands of discipline referrals, a lot of out-of-class time for kids, not sure exactly what they're doing when they're out of class, not always best practices for sure. So there were a lot of climate and culture issues. You can imagine with the division between the principal and the staff on site for Project Restore. So again, we've had these conversations with the academic improvement officer, and then we also asked for a follow-up meeting with the central office at IPS and shared both schools, our impressions of them and next steps. And again, Dr. LeGrand and Dr. Farabee have indicated that they were aware of many of these challenges, although I think we did even give them some things that they didn't know, and they were addressing them as well. So very significant and serious concerns in that school as well from our teams, and we have shared them very frankly.
Well, if I can add, Superintendent, I now represent the 7th District. IPS is within the 7th District. I have a daughter who is attending an IPS school, so I pay particular attention to this district as well as other districts within the 7th District. However, since I kind of ran through the list on East Chicago, I'm going to do the same on School 93. So, quickly, if you'll indulge me, turnaround principle number 1, school leadership ineffective. I'm glad that's being addressed by the district. Turnaround principle number 2, school climate and culture ineffective. Turnaround principle number 3, effective instruction ineffective. Turnaround principle number 4, curriculum assessment and intervention system improvement needed. Turnaround principle number 5, effective staffing practices ineffective. Turnaround principle number 6, use of data ineffective. Turnaround principle number 7, effective use of time improvement necessary. Turnaround principle number 8, effective family and community engagement improvement necessary. Again, you all have done a tremendous amount of work and a great job in really identifying and documenting these issues, which are contained in great detail in this report. So I commend you for that. And I hope that the board will be continue to be kept apprised of this, the turnaround of the school, and hopefully Dr. Farabee will also keep us apprised. But it's very troubling to see this kind of report come through from a 2 to 3 day evaluation of the school.
Teresa, can you also speak a little bit to our multidisciplinary team approach that I believe begins when a school is at year 4? Is that true, or is it year 3 even?
Yeah, it's sooner actually. So I described to you the program, the programmatic way that we've kind of combined our resources at the department, right? So we have all of these folks sitting at the table representing all these different areas. And so as we have a school that's at risk, and so beginning actually at year 2, there are certain consequences and things that we're putting in place, supports, and then it increases, it's progressive. So we provide more and more support the longer the school is still having trouble. So everything including a case manager. So the 9 school districts that I've described to you that represent over 65,000 kids, those districts each have a case manager assigned to them from the department who helps them then utilize all their federal grants in a way that's truly driving school improvement so that the work is more aligned with where we see the actual needs. We're helping them make those decisions. We're also serving as providing them professional development, technical assistance. We've been working with them with Advanced Ed. We have 125 schools that participated in that to help them with their school improvement planning process. So there are a lot of supports we're putting in place to help them do the right work and to give them technical assistance, and then the support from our team so that we're truly wrapping around support services around them. It's designed as a team approach. You know, what can your group bring to this school? We know they need this. What can your group bring? And so we're really coming at them from all the angles of all the supports of the department that are available. Many times schools don't even know what all is available at the department. So by offering them this and kind of us knowing what the issues are, we're able to kind of target specifically how we can intervene and provide them kind of that layer of support.
Yes, well, I'm glad to hear that. Clearly, again, they're being grandfathered under state law, and this board is not allowed to intervene as we would for schools that the state law would apply to. But I hope that there are outreach and other support folks parachuting into these schools to help them because it's extremely dire.
Right.
And I really feel for those kids who are in these schools that are just getting, if you read the report, it's really troubling.
Yeah.
I want to echo Gordon's comments and saying that thank you for the hard work and providing technical assistance. The question I have, over the years, have we seen any schools that have improved exceptionally well in some of the turnaround principles? And have we been able to share that as a best practice with some of the schools across the state?
So we've really only been doing this work for 2 years within this particular structure. The Superintendent Ritz brought this vision of having field support, outreach support within each region, and truly giving schools proactive support from the very beginning. So we've been doing this work for about 2 years. I will tell you, just because I've been there kind of that whole journey, I will tell you just from a personal standpoint, one of our most troubling reports last year was from a school in Gary. And Dr. Pruitt's here, I saw her walk in, but that school is actually on your list for a year 5 hearing. I will tell you though, because I've been there this year, because yes, we do continue to follow up and kind of watch what's going on. And I had been hearing that things had turned around remarkably at Westside this year. So I went to see it myself because it needed so much work. I just had trouble, quite frankly, believing that they were able to execute all of that in 1 year, and they have. It's amazing to me, the kind of turnaround they've already done in 1 year at Westside. They truly have made a huge change. When I asked them how they did it, I talked to the principal, Terrence Little, and I said, can you talk me through what happened here? This is different, very different. And he said that his team took the report that we did last year, and they sat down and they went through it, and they owned it. They said, here's what we need to do, and they started doing it. And Dr. Pruitt gave them the flexibility to make the decisions they needed to make, I think, with staffing and some other changes with security. And they truly have made a huge impact there. Between that and her initiative with Scholastic, having mentors for the principal, I think that has been critical. And now when we look at the data for Westside, we actually anticipate that they're not going to be on that list when grades come out this year. I hope that we're right. But just looking at preliminary data, it looks like they've made that kind of improvement, that they won't be on that list.
So
So it's possible.
And I also will say, in 1 year's time with our outreach approach, right there at the grassroots level, we hire our outreach directors from the region in which they serve. And that's very important. They have a vested interest in their own communities. So they are hired within those regions. And in 1 year, the net turnaround of schools, which was over 61,000 students, going from D and F category to A, B, and C category, where it's 103 schools, 61,000 students, and they didn't move a school. They didn't leave their school. They had improved schools. So we're very proud of our service model, and have and the U.S. Department spends a great deal of time talking about Indiana and our new approach to serving, because we have found an approach that not only can monitor and make sure compliance is happening, but support at the same time. And that's very rare to be able to do all three of those things simultaneously. But I will tell you, we hire the highest caliber of educators to be outreach coordinators. They know what good instruction looks like, and how many classroom observation. We don't just go in and talk to administrators. We observe classrooms. We observe teaching. What was it? Over 800?
Over 820
observations.
The last, yeah.
In the last year.
Mm-hmm.
So we are invested in supporting schools to do the turnaround work. We're invested with the U.S. Department. We love their 8 principles, because it really forces the issue to be done at the school level, and they change the leadership, and they do what they need to be doing, and we're very excited about where we're headed. And we don't want to bring into Gordon's point about the law, and eventually at 4 years they will come to this board. And I said this before, it's my goal. We don't bring any schools to you. That support pieces are in place so that we don't have failing schools at 4 years of F coming to you in any way. So yeah, we're pretty excited about our approach, and we've even honed it in even more with our reorganization, like they've been talking about here today, to have a multidisciplinary team. When they sit down and talk about a school in year 4, all of our team members from grants and title and all of them are at the table now. We're not dealing with the schools in separate entities. We're dealing with them as a whole. And here's all the opportunities and the funding streams, and perhaps you can use money this way with your federal funds to drive this, to make this happen. So we're really talking about real school improvement.
If I may, Superintendent.
Yes, Ashley.
Gordon, you expressed some concern with these reports, and it's certainly felt between Teresa and her team and our staff, because we were the ones in the schools doing these reviews. And the reports themselves are fairly dense, and when we debrief the superintendent from the districts and the staff from the schools, or the leadership staff from the schools, we are really helping them focus on the key levers to improve the school. So Teresa talked about the priorities. We could have a list of 50 priorities for a lot of these schools. We give them 3, because if those 3 things are focused on, they start to roll in the right direction. So, Teresa's team at DOE is providing a lot of behind-the-scenes support to help get them there, and they're kind of pushing that ball along to make sure that those priorities are addressed. So we do, of course, hope to see improvements like what Westside has seen, at least watching the ball roll in the right direction for those priorities, the turnaround principles, that have been prioritized. So we, of course, will keep the board informed as time goes on, and we hope to see those sorts of improvements. Again, they're getting a lot of behind-the-scenes support from the Department of Education, and through your weekly update and board meetings, we can make sure that you stay informed on what those improvements are looking like over the course of time.
Thank you very much. Any more comments? All right, the next item is dual language pilot program and state certificate of biliteracy. Teresa, I believe this is your topic as well. We had Senate Enrolled Act 267, and we're just going to give you a little update.
Yeah, so we just wanted to bring to your attention that in July, you can expect to hear from us. We're going to be working with the state board staff. We have 2 exciting initiatives out of 267. One is a certificate for biliteracy, so we need to define what that is through a rulemaking process, so we'll be bringing that back to you in July for your consideration. And then the second thing is a dual language pilot program grant, and determining how that's going to look and roll out in Indiana and what our parameters are. So again, we'll be working with the state board staff, and we'll bring back those recommendations to you in July. Just wanted to make you aware of it, that it's coming up, so you begin to kind of think about that too.
All right, thank you. Last item on the agenda is the State Board of Education staff update. John, do we have anything?
Madam Chair, if you'll let me, 2 items. If you'll permit me, I just wanted to revisit one thing.
Sure.
You said about the grant funding formula and
Sure.
underscore something you mentioned. You told the State Board staff we'd be meeting with people on Thursday, and I wanted to say that who we're meeting with is the Department's Chief of Staff, Dr.
Yes.
Craig Hartzer. We're also going to try to meet with representatives of the Budget Agency who also have to approve this formula, and then representatives of the legislature who are involved in drafting this. The idea being we're going to be in the same room and all try to be on the same page when we walk out of that room. And I say that because we heard a lot of good ideas and suggestions today. I think until I've had that conversation, hopefully tomorrow, with all those stakeholders, I'm not in a position to recommend any of those suggestions, good as they are. But we hope to soon have something that we can bring before the board, either through a Friday update or otherwise at the July meeting. For the staff update, Madam Chair, if you'll permit Ashley Calger, she has some sort of bureaucratic housekeeping details for everybody on how to get reimbursed for parking and maybe some things the new members need to know to expedite their departure from Purdue. So if I can turn it over to Ashley with your permission.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Purdue has been very kind to provide parking vouchers for you all, and we've already handed department staff vouchers for parking as well. Our interns, on the State Board interns over on the left here, if you see them on your way out, we'll give you your parking voucher. New board members, if you have your paperwork filled out, if you did not already give that to us for your reimbursement and all of that, please make sure that you drop your paperwork off with Monica. Monica, will you raise your hand? Monica Nab will make sure that your paperwork is processed so you can be reimbursed as your normal processes will work. So please make sure to stop by those 2 places to make sure you drop off what we need to continue to move forward.
All right, seeing no more business to come before the board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.